All the primaries are over, and there's no politics till November. But this morning's guest is here to sling some mud. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're in the conference room, the new office of the Myrtle Beach Herald at 4806 Northgate Boulevard in Myrtle Beach. We're focused on one of its columnists, Eddie Paul. Good morning, Eddie.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for coming in this morning.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're waking up finally. 7 a.m.'s a little early. I know. I know. Great opportunity to get you in, and of course to focus on mud, puddle, real estate, the craziest name we've ever had of a column in the Herald, but one that has a lot of explanation behind it.
I put a lot of thought into it. The analogy I use to explain mud puddle real estate is what I call the swimming pool analogy.
Right.
A swimming pool, I mean, it looks beautiful, it's crystal clear, but if the pool guy's doing his job right, it's dead. There's no life there, which is the whole idea behind putting all the chemicals and everything. Where if you contrast that with a mud puddle, depending on how big it is, mud puddles are teeming with life.
Right.
And it's got bacteria and critters in it, and some of them are dangerous. And that's kind of how life is, and especially how real estate is. I mean, there's more to real estate than what you see on HGTV.
Right.
And I get into the stuff that they don't show you, because on HGTV, they solve all the problems and close the deal and remodel the house, and everybody's happy in 30 minutes.
Right.
And in real life, occasionally it goes like that, but not very often. Normally there's a lot of muddy stuff around there, and if people know about that, what can happen going in,
right,
then they're not surprised, and they don't get knocked off course, and they go ahead and work through it, and everybody's happier.
That's a great point, and probably a lot of the folks who've tuned in and seen your column on a weekly basis and are following it along are seeing a lot of things they'd never thought about. Even agents probably seeing it, but particularly if potential users or folks that are potentially buying or selling their homes are seeing it, they're thinking about lots of things they may have never even contemplated.
And I'm getting good response. I was surprised. I did not intend to write for agents, but I'm getting quite a bit of response from agents.
Right.
And a lot of what they're telling me is stuff like, I'm glad you said that, because I can't say that when I'm sitting in front of a client.
Right.
So I can say things behind my facade of mud puddle real estate
Sure.
they really can't say, and it makes it a little bit easier for them. And it's a little fun being recognized on the street. Hey, you're that mud puddle guy. And of course, I try to keep, some of this is really dry.
Right.
So I try to spice it up.
Sure.
And I've got my buddy Cousin Luther.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime I need a bad example, I whip out Cousin Luther, or somebody needs to ask that silly question that nobody wants to ask. Cousin Luther asks the question. The hardest part with Cousin Luther was, since I'm from here and related to a lot of people, I had to think hard to come up with a cousin that I really didn't have.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say, is there a real Cousin Luther?
Cousin Luther is a figment of my imagination.
Yeah.
And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Whether it's somebody real or not, we'll stick with Cousin Luther. That is great. Well, Cousin Luther has been interspersed throughout, almost from the get-go. I don't know if there have been some columns where he or she has not been recognized yet, but Cousin Luther is throughout.
Well, Cousin Luther, if you get very high up the intelligence level, he's not appropriate. Right. So there's a few places where it's not appropriate to put Cousin Luther in, but for a lot of the stuff, especially the fun stuff, and I have fun using him.
He has been definitely a part of it. Well, you mentioned you've got a lot of cousins in the area, so I guess that answers my question of, are you originally from the area, Eddie?
I was born in the Veterans Hospital in Columbia, but aside from that, I've been here except for a tour in the Air Force for 4 years. There's parts of this county that I can't throw a rock without hitting a cousin. I tell people that's the reason I married a girl from West Virginia, to make sure I wasn't marrying a cousin. And my wife Cheryl is from Hamlin, West Virginia, famous for General Chuck Yeager. That's his hometown.
Yeah.
And she actually got to know him when she was a child.
Really?
And but she's director of ICU up at Grand Strand.
Great.
There a long
Boy,
time.
she's busy.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of her, and she keeps me straight, which is a full-time job in addition to her full-time job.
Yes.
And my son is a senior at Georgia Tech.
Congratulations.
Give
boy.
me another year, and I'll have a bouncing baby mechanical engineer.
Is he thinking about coming back to the area? Or has he learned to love the state of the Peach State?
He's not real crazy about Atlanta. He's not real crazy about big cities, but he loves Georgia Tech. He loves the school, and he's doing quite well. And I'm very proud of him. I'm glad he takes after his mama.
Aha, listen to you. Listen to you. Well, if folks have been reading your column on a regular basis, they'd know there's a lot more to you than meets the eye, if it's that. But surely, I'm sure they'd meet the eye and get a lot out of you anyway. But this has really been tremendous. How do you come up with your ideas for a column on a weekly basis, Eddie?
Sometimes I have to. It depends on. I try to be topical. Like right now with the market the way it is, there's a lot of short sales and that kind of stuff is in the news. Well, everybody's talking about short sales,
right.
But there's part of what I want to do with Puddle Real Estate is advise people of what to look out for.
Right.
And with the market the way it is, there are some scams that are going on, and I try to cover those. And then when things come up and I see them, or if agents will tell me, they'll tell me about situations where nobody had a clue what was going on.
Right.
I'll do the research, and then I'll put together a column that addresses that.
Yes.
And some of it is just the column I did on agency. That is basic, but most people have no idea, and some agents don't fully understand it. So I did a column, and if you explain it correctly, and I use a lot of comedy in a lot of my stuff, because sometimes you can make a point better with a story in comedy than you can just blah, blah,
get
blah,
it straight
blah,
out.
blah. Everybody, their head falls back. I think that's why Jesus taught in parables, because a story you can put things in context.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Was there something that gave you a bug to start writing early on, Eddie, or is this something you've been doing a long time, or is it very recent?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing. When I was a kid in the 60s, there were some characters around the Conway area that I got to meet, and they would tell these stories.
Right.
And some of them, I noticed that some people would really react positive to some stories, and other stories people would be like, just shake their head and walk away. And I kind of learned then that the ones that were shaking their head and walking away, they thought they were just trying to tell a lie. But the ones where people laughed and had a good time, they use exaggeration as a tool, but it was so over the top. There was no doubt that they were trying to be funny.
Right.
And so I've internalized that, and I even passed it on to my son, because he got in trouble one time. He tried to tell a joke in school, and they thought he was trying to put something over on him. And I explained to him, I said, son, if you're going to exaggerate, go whole hog, over the top, so far that there's no doubt that what you're trying to do.
Right.
Like, instead of saying that, this salsa will hurt you or burn your mouth, say, this salsa's so hard when you put it in the refrigerator, the eggs will hatch. And so, from that, and picking up on that, and then when I got into school and started writing, well, I was not the most ambitious student, especially in English class, but I learned early that if I wrote a nice, neat story or something in creative writing, I could kind of slide through without doing all the homework and actually learning the grammar.
Yeah.
So that worked really well up until about the 9th grade. Then I got Mrs. Robinson.
Ooh, boy, this was in Conway.
Yes. I don't know what she saw in me, but that lady was bound and determined that I wasn't going to pull anything over on her, and I was going to learn grammar, and I was going to be literate, not just a guy that could tell a funny story or twist a phrase.
Mrs. Robinson.
Mrs. Robinson. Wonderful lady. She used creative writing as my reward. She would let me write stuff if I would do my other work. And at the time, I didn't realize what she was doing. And later, looking back, especially when I had a son, I was like, the old reverse psychology, and she was brilliant at it.
Right.
She was a very good teacher. And what's funny is it made such an impression on me that I'd been out of school probably 20 years and was working at Kingston Office Supplies in Conway, South Carolina. We were also the Hallmark store.
Right.
And it was one of those Hallmark holidays. And she came in, was looking for a card.
Oh.
And I saw her, and I just was like, okay. So I walked up to her and introduced myself. And she said she remembered me.
Yeah.
And I had no reason not to believe her, because she said, yeah, you were in that class. And I was like, okay, that's better than I can do. But I told her, I said, Miss Robinson, I want to thank you. And she said, what for? I said, it's because of you that I'm literate today.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
She was very gracious, and she thanked me. And that instance made an impression on me, and now I'm very quick to say thank you.
That's tremendous.
Because the little things, sometimes that turns into something big later on.
Right.
And what I'm doing today, I think, started with her, because being clever is all well and good, but if you can't communicate, it's worthless.
That's a great point. Being clever is all well and good, but if you can't communicate, it's worthless. That is a great point. I bet a lot of folks don't even think about that. So that obviously, that ninth grade experience with Mrs. Robinson really opened the door. You've maintained this love of writing, though,
ever since
then.
And writing correctly.
Right.
So I'll kind of push the envelopes with some things, but I'm still I want to be understood.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just babbling in the wind if you.
Oh yeah.
You're just making a noise.
Well, I think I saw that there was a time, even when after you got out of the Air Force, you said you spent 4 years in the Air Force, and you began writing some commercials for your own establishment.
Yeah, I backed into running a restaurant, the Old Smokehouse Restaurant.
Right.
And nobody else wanted it. I was the bartender at the time, and I ended up cutting a deal where I leased it and ran it for 2 years, got it back to profitability, and sold it.
Right.
Sounds familiar. I know somebody else does stuff like that. But one Sunday was our big day, Sunday lunch after church. And one Sunday, somebody called me up and said, Eddie, are you closed? I said, no, not Sunday middle of the day.
Yeah.
I said, well, the radio station's saying you're closed.
No.
And at the time, WLAT, which is now the Wave.
Right.
But it was the only station in Conway, FM station. And we had our commercials on there, and they had messed up the ad copy.
Oh, boy.
So I called, and I fussed at Mike Green, and he pulled the spots.
Yeah.
But I got thinking, I was like, well, I can write better commercials than what we've got anyway. Cause my commercials sound like everybody else's commercials, so people aren't even hearing this. So I started writing my own commercials and putting a little twist in them. And started getting good response. People started coming in. Our clientele increased. Plus, the clientele that was coming in was like, I like that spot. When are you going to do another one?
Right.
So it got to be kind of fun. It was one of the enjoyable parts, because anybody that's running a restaurant knows it's hard work. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed it, and it was a great education.
That is tremendous. Well, that's a great example and a segue into writing those spots, having been in the Air Force and having started at an early age, to even more opportunity. It was actually one of your pieces that I saw in an ad for your real estate office for a home there in Conway that was fascinating. I think you highlighted even selling someone else's house, and them being very appreciative of the way you styled their home.
The thing that kicked me and gave me the impetus to ask you for a job writing was Rod Gregg. He's an author in Conway. He has a beautiful house, and I put together a brochure for his house.
Right.
And of course, I gave it to him so he could proof it and everything, because and I was a little bit shaky in the knees.
Oh,
he was this expert, because he literally wrote the history of Horry County.
Yeah,
literally,
sure.
Plus a bunch of other books. And funny thing is, he was one of my customers way back in the days of the Old Smokehouse.
No.
But he read what I'd done, and he gave me glowing accolades, and it just kind of floored me. I'm like, wow, this is like if you're a musician having Elvis's guitar player saying he likes your music. It's like, whoa.